Saudi Arabia is a country known for its harsh laws regarding women and their freedom. Although it has recently loosened these restrictions, it still has a very long way to go before women can be seen as equals. Media has created a platform for women's rights to be shared. This research project will answer the questions: is film the form of media that has the biggest impact for women's rights in Saudi Arabia? Many films and texts have been made about women's rights in the Arab Kingdom. However, do these films have as much of an impact as other forms of media, such as social media? Women's rights in Saudi Arabia has recently gone through major changes. However, the kingdom still has a long way to go until women are free from restrictions. The fight for women's rights in Saudi Arabia has been an ongoing effort throughout much of the 21st century. The kingdom's policy on education doesn't focus their attention on academic success or teachings, but instead it is targeted on giving women the appropriate means to become a good wife and mother. Before 2017, Saudi Arabia was the only country in the world that did not allow women to drive. This became a normality throughout the kingdom and took years to change. Employment was also an area that had a lot of strict regulations. Women were forbidden by law to work in an environment where they could be in the company of men. These were and still are just a few of the many restrictions that women in the Arab Kingdom have to abide by. However, over the last 3 years, the kingdom has enacted a series of economic and social reforms that have seen many of these laws change. As stated before, the kingdom lifted the ban on women driving in 2017, and women can move more freely without permission from a male guardian. Many of these changes were made possible through media coverage and protest movements. Social media has worked to facilitate important movements that advocate for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. The Arab Spring is one of the most important movements that have occurred throughout the Middle East. It started as a series of anti-government protests and eventually turned into uprisings and armed rebellions that spread throughout a lot of the Arab world. This occurred in 2010 and ended late 2012. The group protested for many things, one of them being for the advocacy of human and women's rights. One tool that was used to help the group to grow and thrive was social media. Protesters used social media to organize demonstrations and protests, to gather information and to raise national and global awareness. Another group that was created was the Women to Drive movement. This was created by women who wanted to campaign for their right to drive. Social media was also a key element used in growing this movement. Social media has become an essential tool used in activism in the 21st century. The Arab Spring and the Women to Drive movements are just some of the many movements that social media has helped facilitate. Social media also provides a platform for women to speak about discrimination in their current system. It can be used to challenge leaders by promoting collective action and changing the perceptions of the public sphere. Social media has and will continue to prove as an important source that sparks active protests and movements. Now I want to look at how activist films compare to social media when it comes to the advocacy of women's rights. There have been many influential activist films that have shown the lack of women's rights in Saudi Arabia. One of these films is Wajda. Wajda was written and directed by Haifa al-Mansour. The film was released in 2012, which was a time when women in Saudi Arabia did not have as many freedoms as they do now. Wajda helped bring Saudi Arabia into the spotlight at a time when the kingdom was showing a lack of social change. Creating such a successful Saudi Arabian film at the time was very important. Social change was occurring and the world needed to become aware. The film was debuted at the Venice Film Festival, which is a festival known worldwide. This means that the film garnered a lot of attention and had a large audience, and could therefore create awareness of the subject. Cinema has always had a role to play when it comes to activism. It is a form of expression that can be used to share a meaning or advocate for a particular cause. Films are a great tool to use for spreading a certain message and creating a large audience. They have a wide outreach and can extend to people that don't necessarily know about the cause. This is the case for films like Wajda. However, having a large outreach does not necessarily mean that audiences are going to act. Because film is not an interactive form of media, audiences may passively watch and not choose to do anything. In conclusion, both social media and film are key contributors for the advocacy of women's rights in Saudi Arabia. However, it is social media that can facilitate active protests and movements. Many large movements and causes have been created and shared through the use of mobile phones and online platforms. Using the example of the Arab Spring and Women to Drive. Looking specifically at women's rights in Saudi Arabia, social media has done so much to advocate for the cause and made a real difference. Films are similar, in which they reach a mass audience. However, it is undetermined whether these films, such as Wajda, create active change. Of course, they are used to pass on a message, but audience members are more likely to watch passively rather than do anything substantial. I believe that social media is the most impactful form of media rather than film when it comes to advocating for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. There is so much information on how social media affects activism and the movements it has helped facilitate. However, I have found a lack of research in how films have created change for women's rights. It would be interesting to see the physical evidence of how films that advocate for women's rights in Saudi Arabia actively help the cause.